Hi, everyone. Lisette here. Today, I wanted to give you three unusual meeting facilitation tips that will help you stand out from the average meeting facilitator. One of these tips will come from Heather Hansen. Heather is an accent bias and linguistic inclusion speaker. I interviewed her on the podcast back in November 2023, and she had some great tips for diversity and inclusion through language. My first tip of the day comes from when I used to work for Management 3.0, and Jurgen had a policy of no meetings. If you wanted to have a meeting, you had to convince other people to join. So I'd have to say, okay, Jurgen, I really need you there because we're going to be spending X amount of the budget. And Sergey, I need you there because you are going to be the one who is building the software system, right? So I had to convince people to join the meetings, and that really made sure that the purpose was clear and that the right people were there. So when you're planning a meeting, try this technique of convincing others to join. Not only will it help make your meeting more productive, but it will also impress the people you're inviting. My next meeting tip revolves around quieting the louder voices in the room. Generally, in meetings, there's always one person who goes on and on and on, and it's difficult to verbally interrupt them. If you don't know what I'm talking about, probably you. I jest. But in all seriousness, often in online meetings, it is difficult to interrupt somebody. And so there's been an established protocol for years called ELMO. It stands for Enough, Let's Move On. I've created these ELMO cards. So here's one of the ELMO cards, stands for Enough, Let's Move On. And the idea is that you can just flash it when you understand, like, I understand what's going on. Let's get to the point. Now, one thing that I must recommend if you're going to use ELMO cards is that it needs to be an established etiquette before you begin the meeting. If you just flash an ELMO card and nobody has heard of it before, you're basically telling somebody to be quiet in a very rude way. So we want to avoid doing that if at all possible. So when ELMO is an established meeting protocol from the beginning, it can actually be helpful and put a little bit of joy and levity into the situation. Now, in some cultures, Elmo is still too strongly worded. And so we've created another card called Gelmo. Good enough, let's move on. So you can flash either one, depends on which you feel more comfortable with, but both are available. So if you're trying to quiet the louder voices in the room or somebody's going on and on and on like I am right now, Elmo to the rescue. My third unusual facilitation tip is actually not quite that unusual and is one of the main roles of a facilitator, and that's to make sure that everybody's voice is heard. There are a number of ways that facilitators can do that, but in this case, I want to turn the floor over to Heather Hansen, who talks about a unique technique for getting everyone's voice heard, and that is to acknowledge the person's unique brilliance and invite them into the conversation. Without further ado, here is Heather Hansen from episode number 335.
So, what I encourage people to be doing, especially in our virtual world, is to really be paying attention to who has spoken and who has not, making sure that everyone has contributed to a meeting. If people are not contributing to the meeting, then maybe asking, why are they there? Is there a reason for them to be there? Are you holding and this was a big problem when we moved into the pandemic. People went into meeting overdrive. I mean, we were morning to night on online calls and meetings that were absolutely unnecessary, stuff that even before we would have just handled with an email or a Slack chat. And now we were having meetings for literally everything. And I think that's calmed down a bit, but making sure everyone there's a purpose for them being there, first of all, and then making sure that everyone has contributed, whether that means that you have sent out agendas in advance, given people certain roles, told them in advance you'd like them to report on specific subjects, and then monitoring the conversation itself, inviting people into that conversation to ensure that everyone is heard. So you might the best way I think of doing this is to acknowledge them and then invite. So you build the confidence, because a lot of times it's a lack of confidence that's causing people to turn down their volume and not speak up and jump in. They either don't know how to jump in or when to jump in, especially with cross-cultural differences. And then even if they are about to do it, maybe it's just the confidence holding them back. So to say something like, Oh, Diane, I know that you have been so deep in the numbers of this project. You know every single figure and you've put together so many great Excel sheets. Could you please tell us and help us to understand what's going on here? So, first, you acknowledge their unique brilliance, and then you bring them into the conversation. And then they come into it like, oh, wow, thank you. You know, wow, you're really acknowledging my contribution. Yes, I'm happy to tell you what I know. And I found with the teams I work with, that's been a helpful bridge for bringing them in.
If you want to learn more about how to rock the flexible first workplace, then join one of our live interactive workshops. Our community of professional licensed facilitators will show you how to succeed in this flexible first landscape, happening all over the world and in many different languages. Or join one of our complimentary virtual co-working sessions where we'll show you what a productivity power hour looks like. You'll get things done, meet new people, and hopefully have some fun along the way. Until then, everybody, we'll see you online.